All right, we are good to go.
All right. Dr. Peter Doolittle, welcome to the Studio for Teaching and Learning Innovation. Is it as big and open and awesome as you thought?
It's fantastic. You have the entire library at your disposal.
That's right. That's right.
Who would know that as a Center for Teaching and Learning, you get the entire building? That's fantastic.
Yeah, that came with the deal. If they want us, we get the building. So thanks for being here. And we had a great keynote session with you just now. We want to chat with you a bit more while things are fresh in your mind. And we have some totally extemporaneous questions that we're going to, off the top of our head, or maybe printed out days before. So.
Well, I had to chomp on my tongue to keep from holding so many questions that I had. So
yeah,
it's great to get them by ourselves here.
So we're gonna let our questions out now. So we're gonna start off easy.
Excellent.
Let's talk about complex constructivism. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So in much of your work, and indeed what we heard today, just a few minutes ago, you discussed the active part of learning to be like the mental construction of meaning as a function of external interactions. So in other words, learners need to engage with and process learning materials if they want that experience to be effective. So how have you seen the ideas of complex constructivism evolve with the growth of digital learning, especially these past few years?
Wow. Yeah, and that's both an interesting and a weird question because complex constructivism, having studied it and written on it, most people don't talk about it. And so it's just one
That's
of
why
those
we're talking
things.
about
So this is fantastic. So the constructivism part is important, as is the complexity part. The complexity part deals with complex systems, in which we're looking at systems that are governed by a certain amount of randomness, and so they're not completely predictable, as opposed to chaotic systems, which have a predictability that's hard to see, but once you understand it, you can look for it. In a complex system, like a group of students in a classroom, you can't predict what's going to happen because there's going to be randomness in it. And so the complex part is that you have to be on your toes because best laid plans always go awry. And then the constructivist part is that we develop or build or construct different types of knowledge in interactions with others. And so with constructivism, there's lots of different flavors of it, from radical constructivism, which is more of a Piagetian approach, to symbolic interactionism, which is a Bloomer sociology of knowledge issue. But the idea with complex constructivism is that we're interacting with people around us in very unpredictable ways. And from that, we extract understanding both individually and socially. And so a lot of what we come to learn, especially in a university, a lot of the knowledge is formal, but the way we learn it is informal. And ultimately, the sense that we make of it is not always exactly what the teacher wants, but it's viable for that individual.
So it's interesting because I think you're pretty close to this stuff. You've studied it for a long time, but there's always this practical application in our field that what ends up happening in the classroom or in any kind of learning experience is kind of, the proof is in the pudding. So for someone like you that's very close to this and you've researched this, do you have a couple, 2, 3 kind of favorite processes or strategies for engagement that you used during the pandemic, for example, in this very new complex environment? What kind of bubbled to the top is like, hey, I like these ideas best for my classroom context?
Sure. Yeah. So thinking about strategies, it's a process that I've used before the pandemic, during the pandemic, because it worked well in online digital environments, but also now that we're phasing out and going back to face, and really what it involves, I'm big on group work. So I want small groups of individuals to interact because that's the way we live our lives. We don't just live them sitting in our chair thinking about things. So I will propose something that I want them to think about, and then I'll give them 3 to 5 minutes on their own time to construct their understanding, answer it on their own, because when you throw 4 people together, somebody's going to have a dominant voice, and those people who don't have that dominant voice oftentimes just start nodding. Yeah, that's fine. I hadn't thought about it yet. So give them 5 minutes to think about it so they get their own understanding. They're more likely then to participate in the smaller group. And from day one of class, I foster that within those groups, everybody has a voice. So you need to talk, point at somebody and say, hey, you haven't said anything. What do you think? So everybody has a voice in that smaller group, and it's a safety situation. I now understand what I think. I'm now in a small group. I can share within the small group, And that's a safe zone. And then we enlarge it and come back to the full class. So as a class, what do we think? And you start to get different opinions from different people. So you get a greater diversity of perception relative to whatever that question is. So starting from the individual to a small group to a large group allows people to participate, more voices to be heard, and you end up with a much more diverse perspective on whatever the topic was.
Great, thank you.